So this video may be a bit unstructured. I don't imagine there's going to be some grand thesis, I just want to talk about a series I've been rewatching and greatly enjoying, Assassination Classroom. This series is one that will always have a certain place in the back of my mind. It was back before I knew anime seasons were a thing, or where to watch anime aside from what was available on Netflix. And if I remember correctly, I think this was the first series where I actually found the manga for it first. I recall reading the first few chapters somewhere. It's a bit hazy, but I never continued with it at the time because I wasn't the biggest manga reader back then. I took note though when the anime came out, and before I knew it, I was pulled right back in. Not the most interesting backstory, and it doesn't mean I give the series any bonus points per se, but for me it's something I don't want to forget. That's always a fear, isn't it? That you could watch a series only for it to slip out of your mind within a few months to a year, with it leaving no lasting dent on your subconscious. Certainly anime releases as they currently are almost reward that idea of continuously leaving behind the old for something new, prioritizing the here and now over what's come before, save if the new season has a few sequels. All the more valuable then is rewatching something, ensuring that those in-the-moment experiences of first watching a show are now traced over in finer detail as you discover new and different things to love about the work in question, so that it sticks in your mind even more afterwards. For works I tend to enjoy on the first watch, I find myself doing this faster and faster, sometimes maybe before the show has even finished coming out. But after rewatching SClass, I realize I may be doing myself a disservice, because things change. Not the series in question, but certainly your perspective can, based on your own life circumstances during each viewing and the events that have transpired in between. We grow more than we realize, which gives us new and different lenses to view a particular show through. New Game may hit harder after you land your first job, or any romance anime if you've recently started or ended a relationship. So I can't help but feel that in rewatching some of these series too soon, it'll take longer before I can reach the point where a fresh viewing can give me a different perspective. Maybe I'll just have to experiment and see how well that hypothesis holds up. For now though, let's focus back on SClass. Relative to the series, a big change for me since first watching it was that I graduated college. So unless I choose to go back, I am now done with my academic career. And while the student-teacher dynamic is certainly different in college compared to how it is in high school or middle school in the show's case, there is still a greater sense of nostalgia with that chapter of my life being behind me. I have a lot of good memories, and with the time skip at the end of the series putting the class in similar shoes to my own, I feel I can appreciate the journey they took even more now. I'm also more well versed in the themes that often accompany shonen manga, having read/watched many more in the intervening time. Also, just being familiar with the demographic has led me to a better understanding of the ideas SClass lays out. No doubt the series wears a lot of its heart on its sleeve, or I suppose tie in this case, but going through it a second time, you pick up on more subtleties about how we're all connected and need to support each other, how potential and experience can beget further aptitude when applied in the right way. Our past does not define us, it's just a stepping stone to what we can eventually become. And that's important for us to realize whenever we start or end a particular stage of our lives. What we do with that accumulated potential is entirely up to us. So, obviously, as I said before, nothing has literally changed about the series. There's no canonical reboot or special extended edition. But there were things I was more keen on noticing and elements that definitely benefited from a rewatch. For one, the cast has definitely stuck with me more beyond just Nagisa, Karma, Kayano, Koro-sensei, and maybe one or two of the supporting characters I found relatable. That's a fair criticism of SClass, that the side characters don't get much of a spotlight beyond their few defining personality quirks. But at the same time, you can't expect everyone to be a main character, doing so would have just dragged the story out. This is where a rewatch can be beneficial, because since I already knew where the plot was going, the various twists and turns, my attention naturally gravitated towards one of the consistent elements, the cast. Granted, while I still think I might only be able to get half their names right, I can say most of them left a stronger impression, with those few bits of characterization standing out more the second time around. I'd imagine this is true for any series with a larger cast but shorter runtime, as Assassination Classroom is already a bit of an extreme case. I mean, they even add 2 students to the original class of 26, not to mention those on the main campus, or the variety of colorful assassins. God, there are just so many characters. And yet, during my rewatch, it all felt more balanced, meshing nicely with that theme of everyone being connected. It wasn't any one character's story to begin with, and no desire on my part to find that one whose I thought it might be. There were also more things I recognized on the artistic and stylistic side, which had its benefits but also the occasional drawback, like realizing some instances of less than elegant CG integration. Wide shots with the entire class, I get, that's a lot of characters to draw, but why on this random shot where there are only a handful in frame? Ultimately though, it didn't detract from my viewing experience, it was just something I happened to notice. Plus, the positives I noted far outweighed a few shots that might have just been the result of some scheduling issues. Specifically on this second viewing, I found myself having a greater appreciation for things like the lighting and color choice. On my first time around, I'm sure I noticed some of it, because SClass has plenty of moments where the lighting intentionally and beautifully calls attention to itself. Like this one, where Nagisa shows his true colors, pun intended, to his mother when he clapstuns the assassin. The source of the blue light being the crescent moon that, up to this point, has been synonymous with the teacher that sent him on this path. But SClass doesn't just use these things overtly. The first time I found myself noticing a subtle significance was when Takaoka shows up to take over PE in the first season. As soon as his methodology is spelled out, the lighting and colors immediately become a lot less vibrant than we see with the series normally, which is reflected diegetically in the sky becoming thoroughly overcast. This remains for the entire episode until Takaoka is fired, at which point the lighting becomes warmer literally as he leaves the shot, becoming much more noticeable when we cut back to the students. The symbolism, while obvious, is still incredibly well executed. Likewise goes for the scene that begins the Civil War arc. Everything just has a harsher tone highlighted by the more desaturated color palette during the initial confrontation between Nagisa and Karma, something that remains throughout the 2 episodes this arc covers. It feels less out of place during their final face-off on account of the slightly warmer lighting, but when flanked by scenes of their past together, the change feels like night and day. That vibrancy instead comes through in their eyes to an unsettling degree, which is the point. It's only after the confrontation has concluded that the lighting truly complements these less saturated tones, with it being the warmest of this arc now that everyone is on the same page again. It's nice to see the people behind this series understand how these small elements can really impact a moment. To restate, it's not that you couldn't pick up on this your first time around, especially if you're already familiar with the source material. This is just part of what I gleaned after revisiting a series I'd originally watched without much of an analytical or critical eye. It makes me want to do this for other series I watched during that time period or earlier. Knowing the general story in advance only helps me catch these details. And yet, I didn't rewatch SClass with the intention of making a video. I just had this random desire to revisit a story I hadn't experienced in a while. But by the end I realized I had things I wanted to say that happened to be heavily influenced by the length in between my viewings. Plus, this series needs more representation. I know it's not obscure by any means, it's Shonen Jump for crying out loud. But at the same time, I think shorter series can tend to get buried because they don't run for 10 or 15 years and accrue that same massive and vocal fanbase. There are shorter series that can and have done that, i.e. Death Note and seemingly Demon Slayer now, but those feel like the exception rather than the rule. I'll also admit to some level of ignorance on this because I wasn't really in the AniTube sphere back when SClass was in its heyday, but in looking around, I haven't seen anywhere near the same level of discourse about it compared to its contemporaries like Haikyuu, Nisekoi, or Hiroaka. But this may also just be in the West, as I'm even more unintentionally ignorant of what its popularity in Japan currently is. It still holds the record for best-selling first volume of a manga at 700,000 copies, so shrug? Regardless, I wanted to give it some love after all this time, and now I have a platform to do so. It was a blast experiencing this story all over again, with its appeal intact, if not stronger. But those are just my thoughts, and as always, I'd love to hear what you have to say. Is there any series that you've been meaning to rewatch but haven't gotten around to? Has anything hit differently for you after rewatching because of something that happened in the intervening time? Also feel free to give me your opinions on Assassination Classroom in general. Those thoughts and any others you may have can be left down below. Thanks as always for watching, and an especially big thanks goes out to my awesome patrons, OverjoyedSoup, MVPino, Beorn, Yuki Aly, and everyone else whose support helps make videos like these possible. Links to that Patreon if you'd like to join them, my shirts, and everything else are either down below or on the screen right now. Leave a like if you want to help me out, and click that bell icon to keep up to date for whenever a new video goes live, or you could just follow me on Twitter for that. Thanks again for watching, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time.